Hello there, I'm Black Bright News, and you know me, I love talking about news, especially if there's something that sounds interesting. And so I saw the headlines today about ChatGPT conversations are being harvested. So I thought, that sounds interesting. Let me look into that. So that's what I'm going to share with you today. So I'm Black Bright News, you know that, don't you? And I wanted to talk to you about the latest headlines for people who use ChatGPT. So when a headline like this starts circulating, millions of private ChatGPT conversations are being harvested and sold for profit. We don't just read it and move on, because for a lot of people listening right now, that headline lands in a very personal place. It doesn't sound abstract, it sounds invasive. It sounds like someone's been looking over your shoulder while you were thinking out loud. It makes you wonder whether the late night drafts, the ideas you shaped, the questions you were brave enough to ask in private, whether all of that has quietly been lifted and handed to someone else for money. And that fear is understandable, especially when AI has become a space where people don't just work, but reflect, confess, plan, rehearse, and create. For many, ChatGPT isn't a machine, it's a thinking partner. So let's slow this down, take the heat out of the headline, and talk honestly about what is actually happening and what is not. First, the most important thing is to say clearly and calmly is this. There has been no evidence that OpenAI itself has been hacked, breached, or is secretly selling everyone's private ChatGPT conversations to strangers. That part of the fear, the idea that your entire history has been lifted wholesale from the platform and auctioned off, is not supported by what investigators have found. That is not where this story lives. Where this story really begins is much closer to home, on people's devices. The harvesting that's been uncovered didn't come from ChatGPT service. It came from certain browser extensions, add-ons, that people install themselves, often believing they were protecting their privacy, improving security, or offering a free VPN. These extensions were running quietly in the background of people's browsers with permission to read what was typed into web pages, included AI chat boxes, and then copying that information back to their own servers. In other words, this wasn't someone breaking into the house. This was someone being invited inside, given the keys, then quietly opening the drawers when no one was looking. That distinction matters because it means not everyone is affected, and it means the risk isn't random or universal. If you've been using ChatGPT through an official app or through a web browser without questionable extensions installed, then this particular story does not suggest that your conversations have been harvested or sold. There is no invisible net scooping up every user by default. The people most exposed were those who had specific third-party tools installed that had far more access than most users realized. Now let's address the deeper fear beneath the headline. The fear that your ideas have been stolen, that someone else is benefiting from your labor, your creativity, your intellectual work. That fear hits especially hard for artists, writers, broadcasters, musicians, campaigners, people who already feel that their work is too often taken without credit. And again, in this case, there is no evidence of a system where people are browsing through named individuals' chats looking for brilliant ideas to resell. What is being collected was raw data, unfiltered, unattributed text, valuable not because it belongs to you, but because at the scale it could be analysed, mined, or sold on as data. This doesn't make it acceptable, but it does change the nature of the harm. This wasn't targeted theft of brilliance, it was indiscriminate hoovering by tools that should never have been trusted in the first place. Another concern people have raised is whether there are certain types of conversations that get targeted, certain keywords that trigger harvesting, certain topics that put you at risk. Based on what's been revealed so far, the answer is no. These extensions weren't hunting for secrets or scanning for specific words. They were simply capturing what's passed through the browser while they were active, which again brings us back to the same point. The risk wasn't the conversation, it was the software sitting beside it. And that's an uncomfortable lesson because many of us have been taught to fear big platforms while trusting small tools. We worry about corporations while clicking accept and add-ons we've never heard of. This story flips that instinct on its head. The biggest danger didn't come from the AI company everyone's watching. It came from the quiet extension no one paid attention to. So what can we do with this information without falling into paranoia or helplessness? The first thing is perspective. Using AI does not mean surrendering your mind to the marketplace. Millions of people use ChatGPT daily without incident. But AI, like email, like cloud storage, like social media before it, requires digital hygiene. It requires us to be selective about what we install, cautious about what we grant access to, and realistic about the fact that anything running inside your browser can potentially see more than you think. The second thing is agency. You are not powerless here. You can check your browser extensions. You can remove anything you do not recognize or don't use or don't trust. You can be skeptical of free privacy tools that make vague promises. You can choose official apps over patched together browser add-ons. You can also choose how much of your most sensitive personal information you place into any online service, AI included. And finally, there's the reassurance, because the most damaging effect of the headlines like this isn't always the data risk, it's the erosion of trust. It's the sense that nothing is safe, that everything is watched, that creativity itself is being mined, that's simply not the full truth, This story is not about ChatGPT turning on its users. It's about the long-standing reality that in the digital world, the weakest link is often the thing that claims to protect us. So if you felt a flicker of fear when you read that headline, that moment of thinking, have my thoughts been taken? Has my work been exploited? You're not foolish for thinking that way, but you also don't need to retreat, panic, or silence yourself. What you need is clarity. And clarity tells us this: most users were not affected, the risk was specific, the mechanism was external, and the solution begins with awareness rather than fear. You know, Black Bright News, I'll be sitting with these kind of stories, slowing them down and translating the noise into something people can actually live with. Because the goal isn't to scare people away from technology, it's to help them walk through it with their eyes wide open, their dignity intact, and their creativity still their own. So I hope you found this useful, and I know that there's quite a few people, they're talking about it at work, and I assume a lot more people will start using ChatGPT. For some people, it's a bit of an anomaly. Some people, they just, as soon as you mention the word, oh, no, I'm not touching that, no way. I want to control myself, I want to control my thoughts, I want to control this, and I want to control that. So ChatGPT isn't for everyone, and not everyone uses it. But for those that do, I hope it gives a sense of calm. I hope it makes them feel less violated, and I hope it keeps their trust intact. And that's all for now. I'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye.